Welcome to ADI TV. In this tutorial I'm going to talk about the line segment tool, which is over here on the toolbar, and all the associated tools with it. And I'm also going to cover the rectangle tool and the ellipse tool, polygon tool, etc. Going back to the line segment tool, kind of strange tool. I don't really use it that much because I tend to use the pen tool instead, but essentially it creates straight lines. So if I click and drag, and it basically creates lines. Now at the moment, if you notice down on the bottom of the tool palette, I've actually got the fill and the stroke set to none. So these lines are essentially disappearing as soon as I've drawn them. They are actually there. If I go back to my selection tool and press Apple A, you can actually see the lines are there. So let's just delete those for a second. Let's go back to the line segment tool and let's add a color to the stroke. So I'm going to make sure stroke's on the top because I can only ever change the color of the top one. I'm going to select black from my color palette. Now if I draw, I should be able to see the lines I'm doing. There again, I can change the weight of the line, just like you could with a pen, with a path that you created with a pen tool. So it's pretty straightforward, this tool. So let's move on to the next one, the arc tool. Now the arc tool does exactly what it says on the tin. It'll actually create arcs. Now this is taking the settings which I just had, the 9-point stroke. And there again I could go that to 2-point. Now the thing is with all these tools is that actually if you click on the tool, it actually brings up a dialog box of options. Now in this instance, the arc tool, I can see a representation of preview as you were, and I could change the Y and the X axis. I can change the open and close nature of this arc. So if I close it, then it will actually create a closed object which I can then fill. Also allows me to change the slope and the base along the X or Y axis. So there's quite a few number of options, and if I just cancel that, and if I go back to the line segment tool, and I can actually double click on the canvas as well, and that says the angle of the line, the length of the line, and whether it's filled or not. So all these tools pretty much have those options. So I would kind of urge you, if you're trying to find something specific, is actually to double click on that tool and it will open up a dialog box. Okay, so the spiral tool is there again. It allows you to create spirals. Now, this is something that was quite difficult before they introduced the actual spiral tool specifically to actually kind of create this. Obviously it's a mathematical kind of shape, and so they've developed a whole raft of tools that essentially make it a shortcut to being able to create these kind of objects. Let's just delete these. There again, if I double click on that tool, I can, the decay is, you can kind of mess around with. So let's put in 10. Let's see what that's going to look like. So the decay on this tool is actually absolutely massive. So by putting less decay, it creates a spiral that's much bigger in scale. Okay, so next is the rectangular grid tool, and that allows you to create a grid. Now there again, this is something that was actually quite difficult before. Well, not difficult, it was time consuming, and now they've created a tool which just does it kind of all for you. So let's move that back into the middle with the hand tool. So by pulling out, I can create a grid. There again, with this one, it might be that you want a different amount of columns versus horizontal boxes. So you can double click number of dividers, vertical, horizontal. You can make it quite a few more. And you're free to kind of make all various different types. Really useful. And last but not least is the polar grid tool. This essentially creates a target. Now you'll notice that as I'm pulling that out, that's moving and skewing. Now if I hold down shift, that will constrain proportions. There again, you're free to change the weight of the kind of target. And if you double click, you could obviously mess around with the various different options. Okay, so that's a pretty quick rundown. And next is the rectangle tool, which I was talking about, and that essentially allows you to create rectangles. There again, if I hold down shift, it will constrain proportions to keep it exactly in a box. And if I hold down alt at the same time, it will actually create it from the center, rather than if I take off alt, it will create it from the corner. That's one important thing you can kind of remember. If you want to create something from it and you know the center point, then you can create it holding the alt button down. And a lot of these key combinations, alt and the shift, actually work for pretty much all the tools and work in a similar way. Now let's just get rid of those. So play those, delete those. You've obviously got rounded rectangle tool, which puts rounded corners on the edges. Now there again, if you double click on that tool, there you can change the corner radius to give you a bigger radius. Let's put 8mm. You can change the curvature of that corner. Just undo those. The ellipse tool there again, you're free to create ellipse. If you hold down shift, it will constrain to make a perfect circle. If you hold down alt, it will do it from the center point. And as with any of these shapes, you're free to kind of change the fill. If you wanted to put a color into the fill, maybe you want to get rid of the stroke, you can put the none button. So that's just a circle, kind of a pinky red. Okay, next up is the polygon tool. So this allows you to make, well, by default hexagons. But there again, if you double click, you can change the amount of sides. Let's go 8, and create an octagon, so on and so forth. So as you would guess, the star tool, it works in a similar way. Let's delete those, or undo those. And create stars off the bat. But there again, you can create more 10-pointed star, and you can change the inner and outer radius. So if I made the inner radius, let's say 11, and that brings the inner radius is the inside part of the star, and the outer radius is the outside. And you're free to change those options and create any kind of shape you want. Okay, so hopefully that's explained that. There is a flare tool, and I just urge you to kind of mess around with that and play around. It's not something I particularly use very often, but it's something that will take you a long time to create by yourself. But now let's undo that, undo those. Thanks. The School of Arts and Digital Industries at the University of East London.